Hello health champions, welcome to yet another exciting video about feeding and the fasted state. Now I'm prompted to shoot this video because of several reasons. Reason number one being, anytime I tell somebody to fast, most people are quick to tell me that they will faint and they will get low energy and all these reasons that are actually trying to protect them from fasting, and I understand. Now I'm also shooting this video to just help you to understand that energy does not come from foods that you've just eaten. So no energy comes from the stomach. Energy comes from the fat cells, the liver cells, and the skeletal cells, the skeletal muscle cells. So energy is in the muscles, in the liver, and is in the fat cells. Therefore, we need to unlearn that. And this video is supposed to help you unlearn that, because once you understand the flow of the energy that is coming from the macronutrients, which are basically the three, the fats, which are also called the lipids, the carbohydrates, which addict most of us, and the protein. So we will understand this. We'll also know how insulin plays a role during the feeding state, and how glucagon is a counter hormone that plays an important role again during the fasted state. So we'll compare the two. So allow me to just go straight into it as I explain this. This is Dr. Lewis from the Health and Wellness Pod. If you're a new subscriber here, if possibly you're passing here for the first time, kindly consider subscribing and press that notification bell, because that will make sure that you get information firsthand immediately we post it. So you'll get access to exclusive health content among the first people. So kindly consider subscribing. If you're a returning subscriber, we appreciate you for being part of us and for your support. So now, when you eat that meal, and most of you are so fond of the balanced diet, you know that if you've been in this channel for the longest period of time, I am an advocate of nutrient-dense foods over balanced diets. That is because most of you have been lied to by the food industry that a balanced diet is what you should consume, and therefore you should consume a certain amount of carbohydrate and then a certain amount of protein, and then basically most of our foods have almost zero fat. Why? Because somebody lied to you that this fat will give you cholesterol, and that cholesterol will cause you a lot of problems. Now get this. That diet that has saturated fat, that has high protein, that has carbohydrate, when you eat it, there is a level in the system that when these macronutrients are rich and they've been broken down to the smallest or the lowest level, the body does not recognize that you ate meat, that you ate carbs, that you ate protein. So it doesn't understand that, and we'll get to talk about that. But let me just help you understand how we break down these macronutrients. So your meal is rich in carbohydrates, as most of your plates are. So what is happening to these carbohydrates? These carbohydrates are going to be broken down to polysaccharides, and these polysaccharides is basically a long chain carbohydrate. So when you break the carbs down, you get the polysaccharides, and then now you have to break down those polysaccharides into monosaccharides or disaccharides, sorry. These are the minimum or the lowest amount of carbohydrates in the simplest form. And these monosaccharides are what are absorbed. So when you see this dotted line, that is basically your gut. So this is your system, the blood, and then the liver and the mitochondria. So where this energy goes, at the polysaccharide level, it cannot be absorbed. The gut understands absorption of the smallest level of these macronutrients. Now, when you get to the monosaccharides, the two for carbohydrates are glucose and fructose. We also have galactose, but the major ones are glucose and fructose. So these are what we call sugars. Carbohydrates are basically what we call the sugars. So when you break down these sugars, you get the two simple sugars, that is glucose and fructose. Now, when you eat that banana or that mango or that pineapple, the body will not know you ate a pineapple. The body knows from the mouth, where digestion of carbohydrate starts, the body understands you ate a carbohydrate, not even a banana, not even ugali. And then at this level, after breaking it down to glucose, you will only absorb glucose or fructose. So if you ate a fruit, you will absorb fructose. If you ate that ugali, you will absorb glucose. And this is where you people mess up, because you are thinking because you ate a fruit, you're getting healthy, you're eating healthy. But the reality is the fruit will be broken down to fructose, and you get fructose. So you'll absorb sugar. Now, this is what is going to happen. When these monosaccharides get into the bloodstream, once they cross the gut wall, they're absorbed in the small intestine and get into the bloodstream, what happens is, in your blood, there is always a constant level that is maintained of glucose. So this level is maintained by two hormones. One is insulin, and the other one is glucagon. So we have insulin and glucagon. Both hormones are coming from one organ that is capable of carrying out the whole or the entire process of digestion on its own, and that is the pancreas. Now, insulin is coming from the beta cells of the pancreas, and glucagon comes from the alpha cells of the pancreas. That is biochemistry, that is endocrinology, you don't need to go into that. Just understand that insulin and glucagon are coming from the pancreas. And also understand that if you protect your pancreas, you protect your digestion, because this is the only organ that can carry out the entire process of digestion single-handedly. So protect it by all you got. Those people who drink alcohol, this is the time to stop. Now, when you absorb glucose, glucose has three fates. Fate number one, this glucose will be converted into energy. So definitely, when you take this glucose into, and by the way, just before I go to that, let me just continue with the fate of glucose. One is energy, so that you get your muscles, skeletal muscles going, so you get activity going. Number two is excess of this glucose that is not being utilized by the muscles will be converted and stored in the liver into a temporary storage form of glucose, and that is what you call the glycogen. And then excess of that will be converted into fat and stored into the fat cells. Now understand this, that the body is very clever. The body is actually trying to store that fat so that one day when you starve, you will use this fat, because fat is hard to break down to get energy. But again, fat has the highest amount of energy. Okay? So if you break down this fat, you will get high amount of energy. So that will push you, when you're trying to starve, that will push you through. So the body is expecting the disasters to happen, natural calamities to happen, so that it can break down this fat that is coming in as a result of your maximum consumption of carbohydrates. Number two, we said number two is fructose. And what is the fate of fructose? When fructose gets into the liver or into the system, it is converted to triglycerides. Now you'll realize triglycerides are the metabolites for fats. So you will convert fructose into triglycerides, and then that fructose can be taken into the Krebs cycle in the mitochondria to give you energy, which is also ATP. But the second fate is fructose can be converted into uric acid in the liver. Okay, there's an enzyme that converts fructose into uric acid in the liver. Now, do you understand why when you keep on consuming those fruits, you'll end up getting gout? And then somebody will tell you not to eat red meat because red meat will cause you gout. Now listen to this. Red meat will not cause you gout, because gout is an exit problem and not an intake problem. Which means when you take that fruit or when you take that carbohydrate, you get the fructose or you get the glucose. This fructose causes a fatty liver because you convert it into triglycerides, which are fats, and the liver does not like storing these fats. So either the liver will pump these triglycerides into the system, and then triglyceride levels in the system start going up, and that's a problem to you. Or the liver will convert fructose into uric acid, and that uric acid will start precipitating into your joints and causing you gout. But how is this causing you gout, and yet meat is not causing you gout? This is the point. We said gout is an exit problem rather than an intake problem. So sugar in all forms causes insulin resistance, and fructose is number one on the causes of insulin resistance. Also, sugar kills the kidneys. You've heard of nephropathy. So sugar kills the nephrons in the kidney. And now this nephropathy is actually going to hinder the excretion or the exit of uric acid, because uric acid is excreted through the kidneys. So if you're consuming too much carbohydrate, you get too much glucose, you get too much fructose, you get into insulin resistance, you hurt your kidneys. When you hurt your kidneys, and then now you cannot excrete excess of the uric acid. So this is a double tragedy, because one, fructose is killing your kidney, so no exit of uric acid. And number two, fructose is actually giving you uric acid. So these two are the ones that are combined to give you gout. So don't allow them to lie to you that red meat will give you gout. Now you have the idea why you're getting into gout. So those are the two fats, or the fats of glucose and fructose. Now how about protein? When you consume that protein, that red meat in plenty, and you make it fatty, we'll get to that. But when you consume that protein, What happens is this protein is broken down through polypeptides, the simplest form of protein that is absorbed by the gut, and that is the amino acids. Now, these amino acids are responsible for making hormones and neurotransmitters. That tells you those people who are on a vegan diet will suffer most consequences of amino acid deficiencies, because the vegetable diets have high fiber, they have vitamins, they also have amino acids, but they lack the essential amino acids that are supposed to make you a whole profile of amino acids, that is supposed to help you make neurotransmitters and to help you make hormones that regulate the functions of the body. So you should concentrate on eating healthy protein so that you get the amino acids that will help you synthesize the hormones and the neurotransmitters so that you get a functioning brain and the spinal cord. So now when you have these amino acids being absorbed, so they get into the gut, and then these amino acids are taken to the liver. Now these amino acids have one fate. They can be converted into acetyl-CoA. We will talk about that. And this acetyl-CoA is pumped into the Krebs cycle in the mitochondria. And then there are a series of actions that will happen in this Krebs cycle and that will give you ATP. So yes, protein can give you also ATP. Now this is for the people who are always saying that carbohydrates are the energy-giving foods. Now you understand that at this level, the body does not understand you ate carbohydrates. The body knows every macronutrient can be converted into ATP, which is the energy currency of the system. So unlearn. Good. Number 3, we have the fats or the lipids, famously known as the lipids. So lipids are actually converted to triglycerides. And then the triglycerides, these are dangerous, remember that, because when they start rising into your bloodstream, that is exactly what is causing you those problems, not the LDL. And learn this, because LDL is just a carrier of cholesterol. So it carries cholesterol from the liver to take it all the way to the inflamed sites, because you've been eating sugar, wheat products, and seed oils that are inflaming your system. Therefore, the liver sees need to fix that. So it packages cholesterol onto this LDL, because this is a vehicle, and then sends it to go and clear the inflammation in the system. And then when you have high inflammation, definitely you have a rising amount of the vehicles that are carrying cholesterol to go and fix your problem. So you start blaming LDL, and the system has made you to blame LDL and learn. Okay? So LDL and HDL are just carriers of cholesterol. So this takes cholesterol to the inflamed sites, and once it has fought the inflammation, you've healed, and then now excess of that cholesterol is carried back to the liver by HDL. So these are carriers of cholesterol. They are not types of cholesterol. Good. So you convert it into triglycerides, and then these triglycerides will be converted into glycerol, and this is the diglycerides and the monoglycerides, the lowest part. So you will not absorb triglycerides, you absorb glycerol and free fatty acids. So that is the fate of lipids, free fatty acids and glycerol. Now also remember, at this level, when you're taking these two, there is something that follows them, because there's something that dissolves in this fat. And remember, this is not seed oils or vegetable oils. This is saturated fats. This is what we're talking about, because when I talk about fats, most of you will think this is your favorite cooking oil. This is not. These are the fats that, this is the ghee, the tallow, the butter, the coconut oil and stuff. So these lipids or these fats are converted to triglycerides, and then they are absorbed as glycerol and free fatty acids. And therefore, fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K cannot be absorbed without being connected to these fats. This is something that you should learn. So if you cook your ugali, eat it with your vegetables that have been cooked in seed oils or those vegetable oils, you are unable to absorb fat-soluble vitamins, the A, D, E, and K. Vitamin A playing a very important role in your immunity, also playing a very important role in your vision. And then vitamin D plays a very important role in your immunity, also plays a very important role in your bone development and strength. Vitamin E is used to detoxify the system, and vitamin K is used as a coagulant, so it helps you in blood clotting in the liver. Okay, so imagine if you don't have these vitamins, if you go into these vitamin deficiencies, you will have problems. That's why it is important that your diet be rich in fats, so that you absorb fat-soluble vitamins and you also get free fatty acids. This is also going to give you cholesterol, and cholesterol is very important in your system because it will synthesize your hormones, your brain cells, your skin cells, your aldosterone, which is controlling your blood pressures. Okay, and also vitamin D is coming from cholesterol. So this is very important. Now, when you do that, now you also convert these free fatty acids into something called acetyl-CoA, and again, you load it into the Krebs cycle and then gives you ATP. But this one gives you a lot of energy. So ATP that is coming out of fat cells or out of the fat that you're metabolizing is very high. So now you understand, if you consume a meal, in your mind, as you see the meal, you're seeing ugali. But in your mouth, the mouth is not seeing ugali, the mouth is seeing a carbohydrate. And then in your system, as you absorb it, you're not absorbing that ugali anymore. You're absorbing glucose or fructose, if you ate a fruit for that matter. And then these are the ones that will be fed in the Krebs cycle to give you ATP as the energy. And then when you eat that meat, it's you who knows you ate meat. But at the system level, it's going to absorb amino acids. And then these amino acids are taken to the liver, converted to acetyl-CoA, and then fed in the Krebs cycle so that you get energy. Same to this channel, just like the way I explained it. Now, for those people who keep on telling me that I work on a construction site and I need to eat to fill my stomach so that I can have the energy, you're lying to yourself, because at this level, you already know. Even that ugali would not have taken all this route to come and give you ATP. This requires about 8 to 12 hours for you to get this ATP from that food. So tell us, how comes when you've eaten that food, you're just getting this instant energy? It's a lie. It's because you are a carbohydrate addict. That's why you go and eat chapati. You don't go and eat eggs. You don't go and eat saturated fats. On Mjengo, you go and eat either chapati plus beans or rice plus beans. Most of you don't take rice on construction sites. So you'll take the githeri, which is basically all carbs. So you're here. Your problem is not low energy. Your problem is not even hunger. Your problem is carbohydrates addiction. You are still carbohydrate dependent. So you only understand burning carbohydrates to give you glucose, which is a quick fix. Remember, out of these channels, the three, this is the easiest channel for the body, because once you get this glucose, you can absorb it so fast and you get a false energy. I could put the energy in quotes, because you get a dopamine hit. Once you get the glucose, you get a dopamine hit, and then that dopamine hit makes you feel good and you think you're energetic. It's a lie. Now, this glucose will give you insulin. So it will rise in the blood levels, and then insulin will start going up so that it brings this glucose down. That is where the problems will start, because as you raise this insulin all the time, you'll get into insulin resistance, and that is the source of metabolic syndrome. As you work on that construction site, consider eating healthy. Also, those people who go to the gym, and then after the gym, they want to eat a lot of food. You know that guy. So they want to eat a lot of food so that they get to replenish the energy that they've just burned. That's a waste of time. And fasted workouts are the best, because when you're fasting, you're in a caloric deficit state. And also when you're fasting, you're actually telling your body to burn the fat to give you energy, and not to burn the carbohydrate that you're eating. Because you cannot go to the gym, have a pre-workout meal and then a post-workout meal. You're actually loading your system with calories, and that is not okay. So allow me to draw another diagram that will explain to you the feeding state and the fasted state, the glucagon state versus the insulin state. So once that happens, you will have a holistic approach of diets, and you can easily explain to somebody what to do and when to do it. This is a pancreas. Don't mind my drawing though. This is a pancreas. This is an organ that is responsible for digestion, and actually it can carry out the entire process of digestion on its own, because it produces the lipases, which break down fat. It produces the proteases that break down protein. It also produces the amylases that break down carbohydrates. So this enzyme, this organ alone is capable of doing the entire digestive system job single-handedly. So protect this organ by all means. Now, this pancreas produces two endocrine hormones. One is the glucagon and one is the insulin. Now, these two are totally on the opposite sides. The work of glucagon is actually coming from the alpha cells in the pancreas, and the beta cells are the ones that produce insulin. That's the reason why when you have an autoimmune condition that is actually destroying the beta cells, you will end up having low insulin, and therefore you'll be unable to regulate blood sugars. Because remember, when you eat that carbohydrate meal, you raise your blood sugar levels, and then the pancreas is instructed to produce insulin, so that this insulin attaches to a receptor. So this is a receptor for insulin, and this is the insulin. So the insulin attaches to the receptor, and then when it attaches to the receptor, it opens up the gates of the cells, the fat cells, the liver cells, and also the skeletal muscle cells. So once it does that, this blood glucose now is pumped into these cells for either storage or utilization. So insulin is a key that opens up the cells that will actually store glucose. So that is why it is called an anabolic hormone. We will talk about that also. And the glucagon does the opposite. When you have low glucose in the system, the pancreas will now produce glucagon, And the glucagon will instruct the liver to break down glycogen, the temporary storage of glucose, to give you glucose, and then it maintains that level. So these two hormones are the ones that maintain or regulate blood sugars. Therefore, your pancreas is very important because those people who have diabetes either have a problem with the pancreas or have a problem with the receptors that are actually supposed to take in this insulin. Remember also, drugs that treat diabetes symptoms, for example, the gliptins, the one that end with gliptins, like sitagliptin, they actually destroy this pancreas. So you can imagine, you're using a drug for diabetes that will actually destroy the pancreas, which is an organ that is supposed to help you maintain blood sugars or regulate blood sugars. So what are we doing? It's zero work. We will also talk about the side effects of insulin. Now, glucagon comes in the fasted state, and insulin comes in the feeding state. So anytime you eat, anytime you snack, you raise your insulin levels. Anytime you fast, you raise your glucagon levels. Now, this is what is happening. In the glucagon world, we call it a land of scarcity. Why is it a land of scarcity? Because you're not eating and you're actually burning, because there is energy that was stored. When you're eating, you raised your insulin, and then this insulin pumped this glucose into the cells, the fat cells, for storage for future use. So now, insulin is the land of abundance because it is storing. And now glucagon comes in and is a land of scarcity because whatever was stored as fat is being burnt back to give you energy, because if you don't do that, you will starve yourself to death, okay? So this is actually coming in as a homeostatic movement. And then in the glucagon state, we call it a fasted state. So that is the opposite to the insulin side, which is the feeding state. So anytime you feed, you are raising your insulin. Remember, for you to lead a healthy life, you need to bring your insulin low. And once you bring insulin low, glucagon goes up. Number 3, this glucagon will help you burn fat. So this is the hormone that will be responsible for you losing weight. But insulin is a storage hormone. That's why you add weight. That's why side effects of insulin therapy is weight gain. Why? Because insulin just pumps glucose from blood into the cells and you start growing fat. So your fat cells start to accumulate this fat, they start to bulge, and then your belly just starts to grow big and you start adding weight. So that's why we need to regulate insulin, because anytime you lower insulin, you will burn fat because glucagon goes up. Okay, so that's what you should consider when you're trying to lose weight. This is what you should be focusing on. So fasting is very important for your recovery from diabetes and also for your weight loss journey. So this is exactly what fasting does to you. And then this one is a catabolic. When you say catabolic hormone, we mean kata. From the word catabolic, Swahili speaking people understand kata is just breaking down. So it breaks down things, but insulin is an anabolic hormone. So it builds things. For example, if you have proteins being broken down to amino acids, the small amino acids, that is catabolism. So that is glucagon at work. But when you have amino acids being built back into protein, that is anabolism. We are building from smaller molecules to bigger ones. So that is anabolism. And that's the work of insulin. That's why you grow big. That's why people or men who have high insulin levels end up building the prostate cells, and they end up having enlarged prostates. And then you're told that is high testosterone. That is a lie. That is basically high insulin and also high estrogen. That's a story for another day. So now, if you've understood that, those two, you now know that this one is a destroyer, destroys things. But this one is a builder, builds things, builds molecules, builds your weight. So you should avoid insulin or lower insulin to very low levels so that you can easily burn fat, because that is exactly what we want to do here. Now, on one side, insulin exists on its own. It is that powerful that it has to exist on its own. But on the other side, glucagon exists with other hormones. Now remember, the other hormones that are existing with glucagon are what we call counter-regulatory hormones. And these are the hormones that the system produces in the morning when you wake up. From 4 a.m. in the morning to around 9 a.m., you're producing these hormones. And the role of these hormones is actually to break down things to give you glucose. So break down fat to give you glucose, break down carbohydrates or glycogen to give you glucose, so that you prepare yourself for the new day. Okay, and that's the reason why we tell you that morning breakfast is the worst meal of the day and is useless. Why is it useless? It is useless because in the morning you're producing the counter-regulatory hormones. That is the growth hormone. That is the cortisol that is supposed to help you fight the stress that is coming in with the new day. That is the epinephrine that is getting you alert, and that is also the thyroxine. Thyroxine is actually the hormones that are produced by the thyroid gland, the T3s and T4s. So when you have high T3s and T4s, it actually means you'll start losing weight. That's why people who have overreactive thyroid or goiter end up losing a lot of weight and sweating in the night, because this when this goes up, you start losing weight and is very drastic. And then the growth hormone also plays a very important role in weight loss, but muscle development and strength. And then the major hormone for men is the testosterone, which actually pumps men into being better and competitive. So this side has all these hormones together with glucagon. So you can imagine the benefits of fasting. You'll raise your cortisol level, which is on some level is not a good sign. However, if you have high cortisol in your system, it means you have high stress levels in your system. So the system is trying to help you fight the stress. Again, producing cortisol in high amounts is basically preparing you for stress and how you can curb that stress. And then alertness comes up. That's why you're always sharp when you're fasting, and your memory and your mental clarity improves. And then you lose weight through thyroxine. You also gain growth, and those muscles grow when you're fasting. That's why people who go to the gym need to fast. Then now your testosterone, which builds your muscles, deepens your voice, and is responsible for masculinity. Okay, so that's the reason why you should fast, to get glucagon going up, and therefore these other hormones going up. But when you keep eating, the only hormone that you're raising in your system is insulin, and is a storage hormone, so you keep on growing fat. Okay, so one thing you should know, on the three macromolecules, the protein, the fat, and the carbohydrates, carbohydrates will raise or spike your insulin levels. Lean protein can do the same, but on a minimal level. However, fats are the only macronutrients that will not cause a spike in insulin levels. That tells you you will never grow fat by eating saturated fats. You will never grow fat by, unlearn that. You will never grow fat by eating that egg, by eating that tallow, by eating that ghee. You can never grow fat, because fats will never stimulate a spike in insulin level. It will never. Therefore, you will go into the glucagon state, because when you have low insulin, glucagon levels start going up. Now, this will easily explain to you type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Remember, I told you about the receptor. So insulin has to bind to a receptor so that it elicits an action. Now, when it binds to that receptor is like a hole for the key, and then insulin is like the key. When it binds in, it opens up the cells, so that now glucose flows from blood into the cells. And that is the mode of action of insulin, even the insulin shots. Now remember that glucose is coming into these fat cells as fat. So it's excess insulin, it's excess glucose, so it's not being utilized. So it's coming in these fat cells and bulging these fat cells, and you start growing fat. That's the reason why the side effect of insulin shots is weight gain. Now understand this, that a larger number of people who have diabetes are obese. A greater percentage of people who have diabetes are obese. And now you're bringing in a shot of insulin that is adding on your obesity. Are we really doing justice? That is a question for another day. But now, on this receptor side, so when you have a problem with receptors, so these receptors don't accept that insulin, that is what we call insulin resistance. So that is type 2 diabetes. Okay? When you have the insulin defect, so you don't have the insulin, that means your beta cells are not producing insulin. Therefore, even if the receptors can accept the insulin, but the insulin is not there, that is what we call type 1 diabetes. Okay, so the pathology at this type 1 diabetes, the pathogenesis of type 1 diabetes is basically an absence of insulin because of a defect in beta cells. But the pathogenesis of type 2 diabetes is either insulin resistance, which basically the receptors are not sensitive to that insulin, even though you're producing that insulin. Therefore, you get into type 2 diabetes. Or your pancreas is still functional, but producing a very minimal amount of insulin. And that's why you need to lose that weight, so that the insulin that you produce, and also fast, will be enough for your system to utilize. So that is it. Now, understand this. You are breaking protein into amino acids, as we explained earlier. And breaking protein into amino acids, that is what we call proteolysis. Lysis basically means breaking. You lyse, you break it down. So protein are broken to amino acids. And this proteolysis, breaking it down, remember, lysis is part of the catabolism. So you're breaking larger protein into smaller amino acids. So that means we have glucagon. And that means we are fasting. So you break down protein into amino acids, and then you form hormones that will actually help your system. So we need it. And then the opposite is for the insulin. So when you're building the small amino acids into larger protein, that is what insulin does. So insulin stimulates proteogenesis. You generate protein. So proteogenesis, that is a function of insulin. But proteolysis, that is a function of glucagon. On the another level, on carbohydrates or glycogen, when you're breaking down larger molecules of carbohydrates and glycogen to get glucose and ATP, that is catabolism. That is a function of glucagon. Therefore, when you're breaking that glycogen to get glucose, when you're breaking that carbohydrate to get ATP, that is a function of glucagon. But when you're building this ATP or this glucose back into glycogen, back into fat, larger molecules, that is glycogenesis. You're generating glycogen. That is a function of insulin. Okay? And then when you're breaking down fat to get free fatty acids that are supposed to be used by the body, and also you're breaking that fat to get ketones or ketone bodies. That is basically meaning lipolysis. So you're breaking down lipids, lipolysis. That is the function of catabolism, and that is the function of glucagon. The opposite is true, which is lipogenesis. So you're generating lipids. That is the function of insulin. Therefore, if you're going through lipogenesis, you're actually building fat. So you're combining this free fatty acid plus glycerol to form fat, and therefore you keep on growing fat. So that is what is happening to your system. Therefore, if you block this enzyme or this hormone, what you're doing is you're going to activate this enzyme, and therefore you're going to break your protein to form amino acids, which is very good. You're going to also break the carbohydrate to give you glucose, which is very good, so that you can clear the stores. You're also going to break down fat to free fatty acids or ketones. Now, there is a confusion that comes in here, that when you're burning fat to get ketone bodies, you will get into ketoacidosis. You will realize those people who get into ketoacidosis are actually diabetic, which basically means this. When you don't have insulin, you are building free fatty acids to fats. But when you have glucagon, you're burning fats to free fatty acids and also ketones. So which means this, for diabetic patients, is a problem. How? And specifically those people who have type 1 diabetes who don't actually have insulin. So when they have low insulin, they have high glucagon. But remember, these people are still consuming carbohydrates. Therefore, they're still getting glucose. So their blood glucose keeps on going up, and it cannot be regulated because there's no insulin to pump that glucose into these cells for activity or for storage. So their blood glucose is going up. And now they are still having high glucagon because insulin is low. Now they start producing the counter-regulatory hormones that will start burning this fat to give you ketone bodies. Now, ketone bodies are highly acidic, and therefore they will lower the pH of blood. That means that will be a harmful condition. This is actually, DKA is actually an emergency condition, and it has to be managed by an injection of insulin. But now, that cannot be confused with ketosis or ketogenesis. DKA is actually two energy sources. You have high glucose in your system. You're not utilizing it because you don't have insulin. But you have high glucagon and high counter-regulatory hormones, which are basically burning down fat to give you ketone bodies. So now that is a dangerous condition for you. But ketosis or ketogenesis is what happens when we are fasting on prolonged basis, the 48-hour fast, the 72-hour fast. This is what is happening. You are going to lower your glucose in your system, so you don't have any glucose in your system because it has been utilized, it has been burnt. Glycogen in the liver after 24 hours of fasting has been burnt to get glucose, and then that glucose has been used to sustain your system since you're not eating. And then the glucose is going down, and since glucose is going down, your insulin levels are also going down. Once your insulins are going down, now you have high glucagon and counter-regulatory hormones because this is a survival mechanism. So the body shifts to this direction for you to burn now fats in the fat cells, energy in the fats to give you ketone bodies, which are basically the healthy energy sources of your system. So these are alternative sources of energy. They are not going to cause you DKA because you don't have high glucose in your system. Okay, they are alternative sources. So it's a normal physiology. The body has no glucose, so therefore it turns to breaking down fat to give you ketone bodies that are utilized by the brain and by your system to just detoxify and also clear inflammation. This is the same thing that is happening during autophagy. Now you don't have these ketone bodies. Now the body turns to the dead organelles in the cell to start burning them to give you energy. Okay, so we cannot say that that energy is coming from the dead protein is actually a problem, because it's an alternative energy after you've exhausted the actual energies of your system. Now, most of you are carbohydrate dependent. So you eat so much carbohydrate and your system has adapted to burning quick glucose to give you energy. Okay, so now you are always with high insulin levels. That's the reason why you sit in a hotel and the meal is late and you start getting mad or sick because you can't. That's why when you fast, you're getting so annoyed, you're getting so emotional, because insulin is always high and is sending you into cravings. So you are still at carbohydrates dependent. You are a carb dependent person. But those people who have been fasting for the longest period of time and understand this and have been consuming healthy keto diets are at this level, which is basically what we call the fat adapted. Now, most of you should get into this level. When you get to fat adapted, this means your body is already understanding of how to convert fats into ketones and utilize these ketones as healthy energy sources for you. But until you get to this level, you will always be here. And when you're here, it is hard for you to burn fat. You will always get this confusion, these migraines and these headaches every time you're trying to fast, because the body is actually resisting that transition stage from carbohydrate dependent to fat adapted. So when you get these symptoms, like the one I explained, the ketotic flu, don't give up, because it's the transitioning stage from this to this, and your body will adapt. Once it adapts, now even if you eat that carbohydrate, the body will not depend on it for energy as such. The body will still be able to burn fat to give you ketone bodies which can be utilized. Therefore, unlearn that DKA is not the same as ketosis. So if your doctor tells you that if you fast, you will end up into acidosis, that is a lie. Okay, when you fast, you get into ketogenesis or ketosis, which will give you ketone bodies that are healthy energy sources of the body. But when you continue consuming that carbohydrate and you're here, and then you don't have insulin production, so your glucose is going up, but the body still thinks you're starving. Now the body turns to the fat by increasing glucagon and the counter-regulatory hormones to now burn fat to give you ketone bodies plus the glucose. And these ketone bodies are highly acidic. So they are not now alternative sources of energy. They're actually the second source of energy. So they bring you a lot of problems. So now, this is an entire breakdown of the macro molecules or the macronutrients that you consume, being protein, carbohydrate, and essential fats. Therefore, continue eating healthy and continue subscribing to our channel. If at all you like this video, you enjoyed this video, like it and share it wide so that it can reach a lot of people, so that we can also grow together. We appreciate it.